The sermon for today comes from a teaching from Long Pa Tu, which says, whenever you think about something or make an assumption, you must think according to the truth, so that you do not end up overconfident or heedless. Now, the word heedless in Thai means ประมาท Overconfidence means เชื่อในตัวเองมากเกินไป. Now, what are some examples of this? Yesterday we had a group discussion and we had a lot of good examples of how to think and become heedless or overconfident. One person says he likes to text and drive. Why? Well, I've been doing it for like 10 years and I've never gotten in an accident, so it's probably pretty safe. Another person said, yeah, I heard about my friend. My friend likes to steal, but they probably won't steal from me. I mean, we're really good friends, we're best friends. I mean, they steal from other people, but they probably won't steal from me. Another person said, well, my dad always told me to study hard and get good grades so that when I graduate I can get a good job and my future will be protected. But he always thought, well, my dad's kind of famous, kind of rich, and kind of powerful. So after I graduate, most likely I'll just work for dad. Like I'll just work with dad and dad will take care of me. So I don't really have to study that hard. Now, this way of thinking is very common for people in our life, in our world, even for us. When we see something happen long enough, we tend to believe that this is the way it's going to be. If we keep texting and driving and no accident, then it's probably okay. If we yell at people and they don't yell back, then they probably don't mind, right? Or if we don't study and our dad's rich and powerful, then we should be fine. Or she hasn't stole from me before, so she probably won't. We believe in our own assumptions, and sometimes we get lucky and it hasn't happened yet. But in this case, in all of these cases, something bad could happen. Like for example, the first case, the person who said this hasn't had anything bad yet, but for one of our own members, Mayo, she used to think the same way. She used to always be the driver, always wear a seatbelt, and always drive herself. However, one day, because of overconfidence, she decided that it's okay to sleep in the back seat and not wear a seatbelt. The very first time she decides to do this, she gets into a very, very dangerous car accident in which breaks her back and makes her handicapped for the rest of her life. Is it risky? Very. In another situation, the girl who says she had a friend who never stole from her, because her friend stole from so many people, she had nowhere to stay. Well, it's okay, we're good friends, come stay at my house. In the end, do you know what happened? That girl started stealing, and we didn't think that she would steal from us, and so we blamed the housekeeper. So the housekeeper got fired. And then she kept stealing, and then we found out that it was her, and we lost a whole bunch of things in the house. And so now the family doesn't trust us as the person who brought this person in. We're getting blamed and we feel bad. It's dangerous. Or in the last case, it's very sad, but the young man who didn't study very hard because his dad was so famous and powerful, he forgot one thing. His father died. After his father died, the power and the fame all disappeared. So now he has not so good grades and no father to back him up. Now, in all of these stories, it all comes from a simple concept of overconfidence. You don't think that these things will happen. You don't believe it and you don't want it. So you just tell yourself that it won't. But in reality, the truth of the world is that everything and anything is possible. It is possible to drink and drive and not get hurt. But it is also possible to drink and drive and get hurt really bad. It is possible to not study and get a good job and be rich anyway. But it's also possible to not study, have no job, have no future. It's possible that someone who's a thief and who likes to steal won't steal from you. It's possible. But it's also very possible that they will steal from you and they will hurt you. And these things can all have been prevented. They can all have not necessarily happened had you just thought according to the truth. Seen that all things are possible, so be careful. Be more careful. You can bring that girl into the house. but be careful when you watch where she stays and what she looks at or what she's close to. You can do certain things, but you must be careful and understand the risks that will follow. This is what it means when you say, make assumptions, but make assumptions according to the truth, and for the purpose of not becoming overconfident or heedless. Now in Thai, this is what it's called to แก้หรือชนะความประมาท. It's very dangerous. And this is the reason that leads bad things into people's lives, because we are overconfident and heedless.
So this week's quote is, when you contemplate using assumptions, it must be according to the truth. You do this for the purpose of reminding yourself not to become heedless and overconfident. To me, the most important part of this statement is the second part. We do this for the purpose of reminding ourselves not to become heedless and overconfident. Whenever we make an assumption, thinking that something would never happen to us, or that we would always be a certain way, no matter what, that causes us to become overconfident. And then as a result, when something that we thought would never happen to us actually does happen to us, we're really ill-equipped to deal with it. For example, I grew up as a swimmer. I always was on the swim team and I knew how to swim. I never had my lifeguard license, but I always thought that I would survive no matter what. Then, one time I went surfing in Mexico, and there was a really big wave, and I thought, hey, I have a leash and the board floats. There's no way that anything could happen to me. But I couldn't get under the wave in time, and when it crashed over, I got stuck in like a washing machine kind of whirlpool under there. And that was the first time that it made me think that, oh my God, I know how to swim, but there's no way that my swimming skills are going to get me out of this. And it made me think back to the tsunamis and all the times that I watched the news where there were floods, or when I heard about Noah's Ark in Catholic school, and I thought, those people are so silly. All you have to do is just climb up to the highest peak, and then when the water comes, then you just swim. That's all you gotta do. Like, why are these people dying left and right? I would totally make it. But then after that incident in Mexico, and after going to a water park and playing in the tidal wave pool, I saw that the reality of the situation, the truth of the situation is, what are the conditions when there's a flood, when there's hurricanes and tornadoes? The winds are super fast, super intense, and you get tired swimming. Okay, so yeah, suppose you are swimming in these like dirty, infested waters with like all kinds of things floating in there with you. Would you really survive? It's cold, you're tired, you're hungry, the winds are going at incredible speeds. I wouldn't last. Whether I was a swimmer or not, I wouldn't last. And the evidence is there. Hardly anybody ever survives these things. Do you really think I would be able to outrun a tsunami? Yeah, I was on cross country, but I don't think I would be able to outrun it. But if we do what Longpa Tuan talks about here, you contemplate with your assumptions according to the truth. If I had contemplated according to the truth and seen that, look at all the different natural disasters, nobody makes it through. So would it be likely that I also wouldn't make it through? If I ever thought about how is it possible that I wouldn't make it through, and if I were to make it through, how would I make it through, then maybe I would have had a game plan if something like that would have happened to me. But if I had only assumed that no matter what, I would make it, I would survive, there's no chance that I would die like everybody else dies, then when the time came, I'd probably freak out and not know what to do.
So when I lived in Chicago, I used to, and I still kind of do this sometimes, but when I lived in Chicago, I used to ride my bike through red lights and kind of not follow all the rules of the road that a car always would, because I always thought that bikes didn't necessarily have to follow all the rules of the road that cars do. And I would do it all the time and nothing ever happened. I would go through red lights, and if there was a pedestrian, I would kind of swerve around them, and bikes can do that. One day, I got pulled over by a policeman, and he took my driver's license, and I had to go to traffic court just like I would have with a car. And I went to the judge and I said, oh, come on, it's a bike. And he said, no, it's an actual law, you have to do it. So I got the supervision on my record, had to pay a fine, and had to like bargain for my driver's license back just based on a bicycle. So the evidence that I had gathered that I sort of had ignored is that I had read an article in the paper before I had gotten pulled over on my bike about how there were other bicyclists in Chicago being pulled over for riding on the sidewalk, which is also against the law. But I didn't think police in Chicago really cared about that. There was a lot of other stuff going on. But I had read articles in the paper about it, and I had had friends who were giving tickets for riding on the sidewalk. So I just assumed that, well, it's because of me, it won't happen to me. I'll just keep disregarding the rules, essentially, cutting through the red lights. And I could have gotten hit by a truck or something. I mean, I was cutting red lights. What if I had just not seen it or not heard it or something? But ultimately, you know, I paid the ticket and learned from it, and I've been more careful since then.
Another example about making assumptions that are not according to the truth are when I was in high school, I was very skinny. And when we were going to college, everybody said, you know, you got to watch out for the freshman 15, and then I think you gain another 20 pounds or something like when you're a sophomore. And I thought, that would never happen to me because my metabolism is really high, and look at my dad, he's really fit even when he's older. And I never thought about watching my weight. In fact, I don't think I ever got on a scale when I was in college. But when I came back and people started, you know, giving me a nickname, like they said Cheeks was, my brother gave me a nickname Cheeks because my cheeks were puffing out because I was getting kind of chubby. I thought, oh my God, how did this happen to me? And the reason it happened to me is because I had always assumed it wouldn't. So I never prepared for it. I never tried to eat healthy. I gave up on exercising because I just assumed that I would always be thin. Same thing. My mother also told me a story that she had a similar situation. She was 92 pounds for her whole life, and then she also thought she would never gain any weight. But then after she got into a car accident and they had to inject her with steroids and, you know, different drugs she had to take, and everything in her life changed, she started to gain weight. But it wasn't because of her diet necessarily, but it was because of the side effects of all these drugs. But because she had never thought that these things would happen, you know, there was no way to prepare for it. So that's why when we assume things, when we assume that this would never happen to us, or that we would not be subject to what everybody else is subject to, it causes us to become overconfident and heedless. And a result of that is that you're not going to be able to deal with it when it really does happen to you. You're not going to be able to prepare for it. Yeah, it's because you don't have enough evidence. You never thought about it. But on the other hand, if you did think about it, and we're not talking about like positive thinking or negative thinking, but realistic thinking, if you really thought about it, you would see that can anybody really avert weight gain? You know, our hormones change. Like the reason that people gain weight in college isn't just because you're surrounded by pizza and partying and drinking, but it's also your hormones change. So if you understood that, you know, at 20, at 30, at 40, at 50, your body's changing all the time, then you'd be able to adapt to your body. You'd be able to change your diet, change your exercise habits if you wanted to stay thin, instead of just assuming that I would never be thin or I will always be thin. That's just one example. So the whole point is, if you're going to make an assumption, get enough evidence and make sure that it makes sense. If you keep on siding with yourself, then you're always going to assume that something will never happen to you. You're going to be screwed when it does.
It's more safe that way.
Yeah.
Safer that way with all the evidence.
Because it's possible that what you assume is going to happen. That's one side of it. But the other side of it, you don't want to be blindsided. You know?
Of course.
So, in this quote, the quote says basically you should assume according to the truth. We understand that already. Basically, it means using yourself as an example. Otherwise, you won't know what is true. But the second part is very important, is to prevent overconfidence or heedlessness. Now, in all the examples that we've talked about today, or in our homework assignments, we understand that all of these lead to overconfidence. For example, the example of the doctor, it could lead her to arguing with the patients, being upset with the patients. It's understandable. Or there's other cases where someone warned you that someone's a thief and they might steal from you, but you don't care, and you get stolen from. It's dangerous. Or you text and drive and you don't think it's important and you get in an accident. It's completely possible. These are the dangers of overconfidence, of heedlessness, that comes from only assuming what you want to assume, right? So the way to fix this is this. You have to go back into your experience and look for the proper experience. When you say, I text and drive and there's never been an accident, okay, but do the research. Have other people had accidents? Yes. Have you been in close accidents? Yes. Are the accidents just yours or could they be someone else's? Yes. What kind of danger comes from these things? Once you realize all of this, you'll start to collect more evidence. It's like what's said in the sermon today. When you love someone, you only see their good points. They're handsome, they're cute, they're funny, they're attractive, they're interesting. But when you want to break up with them, what do you see? Rude, disgusting, unclean, inconsiderate. It's still the same person, but you only choose to see what you want to see. But the whole idea of this is that you see the whole thing so you're not overconfident. If you know they're good and they're bad in the beginning, you can marry them and date them, but you're willing to accept what they have because that's who they are. They're most likely not going to change too much. That's your job. Otherwise, you're too overconfident. Now, this is a summary of the first concept of this. However, there's a secret hidden technique here that a lot of people will miss out on.
So I think there's two aspects to this quote. There's the aspect of assuming that something will never happen to you. And there's the other aspect, which is assuming that it could definitely happen to you. In the way that we practice, in the way that Luang Por Thun taught us, he said, make sure that you contemplate that when you see anybody, when you see anything, even if it seems impossible in this lifetime, if you're going to keep on being reborn, that can definitely become your fate. For instance, if I were to see a homeless person begging for food or for money in front of my restaurant, and if I think, well, that's impossible in this lifetime. I have savings, I have life insurance, that would never happen to me, I would never be homeless. So if I were to think that and just never contemplate the state of being homeless, the state of asking for food, asking for alms, then I would completely miss out on one possible lifetime that I could cut out. But if I were to contemplate that, could that happen to me? Definitely. And if I was homeless, how would I feel when I was asking for money? Where would I go and ask for money? Would I ask for food? Would I ask for money? What would I buy with that money? Would I have a sign? Would I sit? Would I sell newspapers? What kind of homeless person would I be? You know, and then similarly, when you see people, even people that seem successful, like for instance, politicians that are on the rise, if you think, well, I'm really not interested in politics, that would never happen to me because I just don't like government, I don't like, you know, those things, so that's not really something I need to worry about. Then you would completely miss out on learning about how somebody becomes a politician. What are the struggles? What are the positive and the positives and the negatives that they deal with day to day? You know, they make a statement one day, everybody's all happy about it. The next day, something changes in the government, and suddenly that statement is what's going to bring them down, which is going to make sure that they don't have a future in politics anymore. How does that feel? Would I want that? What are the benefits? What are the harmful consequences in that kind of profession? So if we're able to look at everybody on the news, listen to the radio, people we see at the supermarket, and assume that we are that person, really, in their day-to-day life, then we will benefit. We will be able to see what that lifetime would be like, and then we will be able to push away that lifetime and say, you know, as good as it is, I don't want it, and I'm not going to have that lifetime anymore. And that's a benefit in contemplating assumptions for the purpose of not becoming overconfident.
The hidden trick is that we have to be reborn in this world continuously. It's a given until we reach enlightenment. However, we have a very scary power inside of us, which is called denial. We deny everything we see. You see someone fat, and if you're not fat, oh, too bad for them, or that sucks for them, and then you let it go. Or you listen to, oh my God, there's a 6-year-old kid in India who got raped. Ew, disgusting. Next TV show now. You read the news, you read through each thing, and you let it go. Because you deny that you have anything to do with it. It has nothing to do with you. So you leave it, you move on. This is the stupidity of human beings. Because of that, you're overconfident. You think that it will never happen to you. You'll never be in an accident. You'll never die. You'll never lose your leg. You'll never be raped. You'll never be abused. You'll never be hurt. You'll never be stolen from. And so you don't protect against it. Like when you go to the stores and they offer you that 3-year warranty, do you usually buy it? No. Why? It's not going to happen to me, right? So the concept is, this is what Luang Por Thun teaches. He says, as long as you are still subject to rebirth, as long as you are still subject to rebirth, as long as you keep coming back, you will have to be born as everything that you see, definitely. This is the way you should assume. So when you see a handicapped person, think immediately, I will have to be handicapped either this life, next life, or sometime soon. Guaranteed. You see someone getting raped or abused or hurt, I will be raped. I will be abused. I will be hurt. For sure. The more you think like this, it makes you scared. It makes you accept that rebirth is not pleasant. It's not happy. It's scary. There's a risk. And it makes you prepare yourself to try not to come back. So this is the secret teaching of Luang Por Thun, which is whatever you see, internalize it and accept it that you will be this definitely. Put yourself in their position. Imagine it and learn from it. This is how you think in order to not come back to be reborn. In our style, we call it erasing future births. As long as you still want to be beautiful, as long as you still want to be rich, you still want to be famous, you want to be popular, you want to be powerful, you will have to be reborn to get these things. And therefore you will reach the problems that these people also have. But if you learn about it now and you contemplate it now, you are no longer subject to that rebirth because you no longer desire that thing. For example, when I was younger, I was always taught, grow up, make a lot of money, get married. A beautiful girl would be good. The ugly ones, no good. That's what we were taught. However, as I got older, I learned my own lesson that beautiful or ugly, rich or poor, it does not lead to happiness. And therefore, I was able to let it go and become a monk. Otherwise, I would be subject to that birth also. And so this is the secret technique that Luang Por Thun teaches that we should all practice all the time. It's very important, and it's one of the secret techniques that not a lot of people know. But it's a secret technique that will lead you towards enlightenment, or at least less future births.